The boy talks about metal. They all laughed when he approached the engine. 5 seconds later, the only sound was the roar of the impossible. What if I told you that genius isn't always found in a lab coat or a corner office, but sometimes in the grease-stained hands of a 13-year-old boy who the world had already decided to forget? This isn't just a story about gears and pistons. It's about the moment a quiet kid in a room full of doubters turned the tables and rewrote the definition of power and helped this channel reach our first 1,000 subscribers together. If you believe that talent can bloom in the most unlikely of places, and that the greatest victories are won in silence, then stick with me. Because what Kai is about to do will change everything. The workshop at Northwood Technical Academy hummed with a tension you could taste the bitter, electric charge that precedes a public failure. Fluorescent lights cast a sickly, sterile glow on a graveyard of machinery. Rusted engine blocks and skeletal frames lay scattered like the bones of metal dinosaurs. A dozen advanced placement students, all swagger and clean fingernails, shifted in their seats. Their whispers were sharp, their smirks sharper. They all turned when the door creaked open. Kai Hayes stepped inside. 13 years old, with a frame so slight the hand-me-down jacket seemed to swallow him whole. His sneakers were worn through at the soles, and his dark curls were a chaotic halo around a face that held a stillness far beyond his years. His hands, though, told a different story. They were young, but the grit and oil were ground deep into his knuckles, the calloused map of 1,000 hours spent in his uncle's garage. He looked like he belonged in a junkyard, not in a class reserved for the school's best and brightest. But his eyes were different. Calm, laser-focused. They absorbed the room not as a threat, but as a series of interconnected parts. Hayes, the voice of Mr. Fletcher, the instructor, cracked through the room like a bullwhip. It was a voice that never requested, only commanded. "Think you're ready for the big leagues?" He gestured with a wrench toward a hulking, rusted V8 engine mounted on a stand in the center of the room. It was a relic, a metal carcass. "That beast hasn't so much as coughed in 5 years. My top seniors couldn't coax a spark out of it. Let's see what magic you've got." A ripple of laughter spread through the class. Blake, the top student with a smirk permanently etched on his face, whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear, "He's gonna cry." But Kai didn't even blink. He walked forward, his steps steady on the grimy concrete floor, moving through a gauntlet of skeptical stares and muttered jokes. The moment his fingers made contact with the cold, oxidized steel, the rest of the world dissolved. He didn't hear the snide remarks. He didn't feel the weight of their judgment. He saw only the machine. What they saw as a hunk of junk, Kai saw as a puzzle begging to be solved. He had grown up in the language of machines, listening to the quiet symphony of his uncle's garage. While other kids were chasing soccer balls, Kai was dissecting broken lawnmowers and rebuilding dirt bikes from scavenged parts. He learned that every machine has a story, a rhythm, a voice. You just had to be quiet enough to hear it. Mr. Fletcher circled him like a hawk. "Don't touch anything yet," he snapped, arms crossed. "Let's test that confidence. Tell us what's wrong with it." "Just from looking." The class chuckled again, ready for the show. Kai remained silent, his gaze sweeping over the engine with the intensity of a surgeon planning his first cut. He closed his eyes for a second, tilted his head, and inhaled. Then, calmly, he spoke. "Carburetors flooded. Spark plugs are fouled. You can smell the carbon. Fuel lines got a blockage, old gas has turned to varnish. And whoever rewired this didn't ground the ignition coil properly." A hush fell over the workshop. The only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights. Mr. Fletcher's lips tightened into a thin, hard line. He didn't like being challenged, especially not by a boy who wasn't even supposed to be in his advanced class. "Fine," Fletcher said. His voice clipped. "You've got 10 minutes." Kai nodded and knelt. What followed wasn't a show. It was a ballet of quiet efficiency. His hands moved with a purpose that was both gentle and firm, removing panels, checking connections, his fingers dancing across wires and hoses. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate. He was listening. The crowd watched, their amusement slowly morphing into a grudging curiosity. Still, the doubt was a heavy blanket in the room. Blake whispered to his friend, "He's just wasting time. Probably saw some of this on YouTube." But Kai wasn't doing this for them. He remembered his Uncle Ben's voice, a low rumble in the cold garage night after night. "Don't just fix the machine, Kai. Understand it. Hear what it's trying to tell you." He remembered the sting of being dismissed, of being called just a kid. This engine wasn't just metal, it was every doubt he'd ever faced. A sharp metallic clang echoed as Kai dropped a socket wrench. His hand trembled for a split second. It wasn't nerves. It was a flash of anger at how quickly the world dismissed effort when it didn't look the way they expected. He took a breath. Control the tool. Don't let it control you. He picked it up, his movements deliberate again. Then, from the back of the room, a clear voice cut through the tension. "Let the kid work." It was Maya, an artist who rarely spoke, who saw the world in lines and blueprints instead of words. She was standing now, arms crossed, not in defiance, but in defense. Mr. Fletcher shot her a warning look, but she didn't back down. "Seriously," she added, her voice quiet but firm. "None of you have gotten that thing to even sputter in months. At least he's trying." A few students shifted uncomfortably. Blake rolled his eyes but stayed quiet. Kai gave Maya the briefest glance, a flicker of acknowledgement, and turned back to his work. The noise faded once more. 3 minutes left, Hayes," Fletcher said, his voice cold. This was it. Kai reached for the ignition key, a piece of scratched silver. He paused, his eyes closed. He wasn't afraid of the engine failing. He was afraid of proving them right. So many kids give up, not because they're weak, but because they're tired of fighting to be seen. But not today. He turned the key. Click. Nothing. A low wave of laughter started to build from the back. Told you, Blake smirked. Kai didn't flinch. He twisted the key again, slow and deliberate. Click, chug, chug. Cough. The engine groaned, sputtered, and died. Silence. Kai leaned in, made one tiny, almost imperceptible adjustment to a wire. Maya held her breath. He turned it one more time. This time the engine coughed, choked, and then roared to life. It wasn't just a sound, it was a force. A deep, guttural thunder that ripped through the workshop and annihilated the silence. The laughter died instantly, strangled in the throats of the doubters. Blake's mouth hung open. Mr. Fletcher took a single, involuntary step back. Maya's lips parted in a silent, stunned "oh." But Kai, he just stood there, hand resting on the vibrating engine, his heart pounding a triumphant rhythm against his ribs. The engine's purr wasn't just mechanical. It was a declaration, a rhythmic growl that swallowed every insult and every whispered joke, an anthem for every underestimated soul who ever dared to try. For a heartbeat, the world was frozen, Mr. Fletcher stared, his face a mask of disbelief, as if the laws of physics had just been personally rewritten in front of him. Who told you to check the ignition grounding? Fletcher finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Kai shrugged, pulling his hand back. The engine did. It wasn't arrogance. It was a simple, unshakable truth, and that made it hit even harder. The students who had laughed now hovered awkwardly, their faces a mixture of guilt and awe. Fletcher straightened up, his expression unreadable. That engine wasn't just broken, he muttered, almost to himself. It was rigged. He looked at Kai. Wrong wires, bad fuses. I set it up as a trap, a test to see who could think, not just follow a manual. He paused, his eyes locking with Kai's. No one was supposed to pass. A new silence fell, this one filled with a dawning understanding. Kai hadn't just fixed a broken machine. He had solved an unsolvable puzzle. "What's your name again?" Fletcher asked. Kai Hayes. Fletcher stared a moment longer, then gave a single, sharp nod. It wasn't praise. It wasn't surrender. It was respect. As Kai turned to leave, Maya stepped into his path. "You just made a lot of powerful people look really foolish," she said with a small, brilliant smile. "I wasn't trying to," he answered softly. "I know," she said. "That's why it worked." And for the first time that day, Kai smiled back. It was small, brief, but it was real. He didn't need the spotlight. He just needed to know it could be done. But in the roar of that resurrected engine, something had shifted forever. The workshop no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt for the first time like a place he might actually belong.